8 years ago, an experienced hiker vanished without a trace in Yosemite National Park. No cry for help, no belongings left behind, only unanswered questions, echoing through the towering cliffs and endless forests. Family, friends, and even seasoned search and rescue teams tried everything, but the disappearance slowly faded into silence, as if Yosemite had swallowed him whole. But one fateful night near Lake Tenaya, that silence was broken. A faint signal crackled over the radio waves, repeating a strange sequence of numbers, lasting exactly 4 minutes before vanishing again. And when investigators checked, those coordinates pointed straight into the remote wilderness near Half Dome Place, with no signal towers, no settlements, and no reason for any transmission to exist. The haunting question now is not simply where the hiker went, but rather, how could a distress signal emerge from the wilderness 8 years after he disappeared? The man who vanished was not a careless tourist or a weekend wanderer. His name was Thomas Bradley, though everyone simply called him Tom. At 51 years old, Tom was a man of quiet strength and quiet passions. He had built a life in the suburbs of Northern California, raising 2 children who were already grown and finding himself drawn more and more into the wilderness as he got older. Hiking was not just a hobby for Tom, it was his therapy, his sanctuary, the place where he felt most himself. Those who knew him would later describe him as meticulous. He kept his gear organized, checked weather reports with precision, and never set out without letting someone know his route. Yosemite, to him, was both a challenge and a refuge. He had been there more times than he could count, and each visit left him humbled by its vastness. Granite cliffs rising thousands of feet, meadows stretching into the horizon, rivers carving through valleys, the park was, in his eyes, a cathedral built not by men, but by time itself. That summer, Tom spoke often about one last long trek before the season changed. He had his sights set on an extended route that would take him past familiar landmarks. Half Dome, Cloud's Rest, and the remote canyons where tourists rarely ventured. Friends remembered the gleam in his eyes when he talked about it. For Tom, it wasn't about conquering nature, but about blending into it, disappearing for a short while in its silence before returning refreshed. The morning he left, the skies were clear, the air crisp with the promise of summer's end. His backpack, though heavy, was packed with precision: freeze-dried meals, water purification tablets, extra layers for the mountain chill, a compact tent, and, most importantly, his GPS and radio. His daughter recalled watching him adjust the straps and jokingly asking if he was going off the grid for good. Tom laughed, kissed her on the forehead, and promised he would be back in a week. Witnesses later said they saw him at a trailhead near Tenaya Lake, calm and confident as he set out. One camper remembered how he paused to take in the view, standing still for a long moment, as if imprinting the beauty of the place onto his memory. Then, with steady strides, he disappeared into the forest, swallowed by the trail and the whispering pines. No one realized then that those footsteps would be the last anyone would ever see or hear from Tom. For days afterward, his absence meant nothing. He was, after all, a man who cherished solitude. But in hindsight, that morning marked the beginning of a mystery that Yosemite still refuses to give up. At first, there was nothing unusual about Tom's hike. The trail he had chosen was known among seasoned backpackers. Challenging but navigable. Remote but not impossible. It was the kind of route that required focus and stamina, but for someone with Tom's experience, it should have been well within reach. The first day went as planned. According to his journal, later found among his belongings, Tom described the beauty of the meadows, the distant outline of Half Dome rising like a stone guardian, and the solitude that filled him with peace. He noted the weather conditions: clear skies, mild winds, no sign of storms. His words gave no hint of fear, only a calm appreciation for the world around him. But by the third day, the silence began. His scheduled check-in never came. Tom was known for keeping in touch, whether through his radio or short notes relayed when he passed by busier campsites. That day, Nothing came through. His daughter tried not to worry. Perhaps he was in a dead zone. Perhaps he had decided to stay off the grid longer than expected. Yet deep down, unease began to creep in. By the fourth day, when Tom was supposed to reappear on a connecting trail, there was still no sign of him. Other hikers who passed through the area reported nothing unusual. No distress calls, no abandoned camps, no traces of struggle. It was as though Tom had simply walked into the trees and vanished. When he failed to return home by the end of the week, his family alerted authorities. The official search began almost immediately. Rangers combed the trails near Tenaya Lake and Half Dome. Helicopters scanned the valleys and granite cliffs. Search and rescue teams with trained dogs were deployed. For days, the park buzzed with the hum of engines and the shouts of rescuers calling his name. And yet, nothing. No footprints, no scraps of clothing, no torn fabric caught on a branch. His campsite, wherever he had set it up, left no trace. The dogs caught no reliable scent trail. It was as though Yosemite had swallowed him whole. Theories circulated quickly. Some believed he had fallen into one of the park's countless ravines, hidden by underbrush where no eye could see. Others whispered that he had encountered a wild animal, though there was no evidence of an attack. A few suggested he might have chosen to disappear, abandoning the life he had built for something more mysterious. But to his family, those theories felt hollow. Tom was not a man who left without a word, nor someone who would abandon those he loved. Days stretched into weeks, and the search expanded farther into the wilderness. Still, no sign of Tom emerged. Finally, after nearly a month, the official operation was scaled back. The park returned to its silence, and the Bradley family was left with a void where answers should have been. The mystery of Tom's disappearance became just another unsolved story in Yosemite's long, haunting history. But for his family, it was not just a story. It was a wound that refused to heal, an unfinished chapter that left them waiting, year after year, for a resolution that never came. After the official search was called off, life for Tom Bradley's family entered a strange limbo. They could not bury him, because there was no body. They could not grieve properly, because there was no certainty. Instead, they lived with a silence that felt heavier than any answer could have been. In the first year, hope still lingered. His daughter checked her phone compulsively, waiting for a call that never came. His son scanned news reports, convinced that some hiker, somewhere, would stumble across a trace of their father. On anniversaries, the family drove back to Yosemite, standing at the trailhead where Tom was last seen. They left flowers, whispered prayers, and listened to the wind sigh through the pines, as if it might carry back a message. But year after year, nothing surfaced. Yosemite went on with its eternal rhythms, snow melting into rushing rivers in spring, wildflowers carpeting the meadows in summer, golden leaves tumbling in autumn, silence falling heavy with winter snow. Tourists came and went, thousands of boots pressing into the dirt trails, and yet not one of them found a clue. The park rangers moved on to new emergencies. Hikers lost and later found. Climbers stranded on cliffs, bears raiding campsites. Tom's case was filed away, another unsolved mystery among many. But for his family, the wound remained raw. Every time the phone rang late at night, his daughter's heart leapt before crashing back into disappointment. Every time an unknown number appeared on caller ID, his son answered with trembling hands, only to hear the voice of a stranger. Friends tried to help. Some said to let go, to accept the reality that Tom was gone. Others clung to wilder theories that he had been taken, that he had chosen a secret life far from civilization. But the family knew those explanations didn't fit the man they had loved. Tom was steady, dependable, a man who never turned his back on responsibility. His absence was a mystery that made no sense. 8 long years passed this way. The Bradley family aged in their grief. His daughter married, walking down the aisle with a smile on her face but a hollow place in her heart where her father should have been. His son had children of his own, telling them stories about the grandfather they would never meet. Life moved forward, but it always felt incomplete, like a book missing its final chapter. And then, One quiet night, near Tenaya Lake, the silence cracked. A faint signal pulsed across the radio waves, carrying coordinates that pointed directly into Yosemite's remote wilderness. After 8 years of emptiness, something or someone was calling from the shadows of Half Dome. It was late summer when a small group of campers made their way into Yosemite's backcountry. They weren't thrill seekers or professional explorers, just 4 friends in their 30s who wanted a weekend away from the noise of the city. They hiked with laughter, carried heavy packs, and set up camp near the edge of a granite slope overlooking Tenaya Lake. The air was cool, the stars sharp against the dark sky, and the stillness of the wilderness wrapped around them like a blanket. On the second night, while they sat by the fire trading stories, one of them pulled out a handheld radio, a hobby he carried on most camping trips. Usually, it picked up nothing more than static, or the occasional faint chatter from faraway stations. But on this night, something different happened. At first, it was only a low crackle, easy to dismiss as background noise. Then, a faint series of beeps broke through. The campers leaned in, exchanging curious glances. The beeps weren't random. They came in a steady rhythm, punctuated by silence, then returned again, repeating with a strange precision. One of them recognized the pattern. It was Morse code. Slowly, haltingly, they translated the sequence. Numbers, a set of coordinates. Over and over, for exactly 4 minutes, the signal persisted. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished back into static. The friends sat in stunned silence, the fire crackling between them. Coordinates? Out here? It made no sense. They checked the numbers against their maps, and their unease grew. The location was not far from where they camped, deep within a cluster of caves near the base of Half Dome. At first, they laughed nervously. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some other campers were playing tricks with a transmitter. But the more they thought about it, the less likely that seemed. They hadn't seen another soul in 2 days. The area was remote, far from busy trails, and there was no sign of equipment or people nearby. That night, none of them slept easily. Each crackle of the fire, each rustle of wind through the pines, seemed to echo with hidden meaning. When morning came, curiosity overcame fear. They decided to follow the coordinates. The hike wasn't long, but it was steep and unsettling. The trail faded as they climbed, forcing them over boulders and into narrow passages where shadows pooled thick and heavy. The caves came into view slowly, dark mouths opening in the granite like ancient silent watchers. The air grew cooler, carrying a damp mineral smell. At the entrance of the largest cave, they found something strange. Scattered just outside, half buried beneath leaves and dirt, lay fragments of gear, a torn strap, a cracked water bottle, an old compass dulled with rust. One of the campers bent down, brushing away soil, and froze. The initials T.B. were scratched faintly into the back of the compass casing. A chill swept through the group. They didn't know the full story yet, but something deep inside told them these objects belonged to someone who had been lost long before. They gathered the items carefully, their laughter gone, replaced with an uneasy silence. When they returned to camp, one of them insisted they report what they had found. Another argued it might be nothing, just old debris left behind years ago. But the strange signal haunted them. Why would coordinates transmit from this exact spot? And why now, after all this time? That evening, they made the call. Park rangers arrived the next day, skeptical at first, but intrigued by the details. The coordinates, the signal, the gear, it was too much to ignore. The investigation would lead them deeper into the caves, where the story of Tom Bradley, long presumed lost forever, would take a darker, more unsettling turn. When the park rangers arrived, the campers led them straight to the cave at the base of Half Dome. The morning light fell in long beams across the granite, but the shadows clinging to the cave mouth made it look almost alive, like a dark throat ready to swallow anyone who dared enter. The rangers, accustomed to strange calls and false alarms, approached with measured skepticism. Yet, as soon as they saw the scattered items on the ground, their expressions changed. One ranger crouched down and lifted the rusted compass the campers had found. Turning it over, he studied the faintly scratched initials, TB. He said nothing for a long moment, but the others exchanged glances. They all knew the case. Tom Bradley's disappearance had been one of the more baffling unsolved files in the park's history. Further inspection revealed even more. A weathered backpack strap lay tangled beneath roots, and beside it, a bent metal canteen, the kind issued years earlier, but rarely seen now. Nearby, the brittle remains of paper, possibly pages from a journal, were found wedged between rocks, stained with time and moisture, the writing smeared but still faintly visible. The group stood in uneasy silence. None of the objects looked freshly placed. They bore the marks of years spent in the elements, rust, decay, and moss growing over their surfaces. It was unlikely they had been left there recently. But the most unsettling detail was not what they found. It was where they found it. The items were scattered as though dropped suddenly, abandoned in haste. The backpack strap had been torn, not cut. The compass was cracked along the edge. And the journal pages, though nearly illegible, carried fragments of sentences that sent a chill through the investigators. Trapped. Need to signal no light. The words suggested desperation, the last attempt of a man trying to reach out before the wilderness claimed him. The rangers decided to push deeper into the cave. Flashlights pierced the darkness, illuminating jagged walls glistening with moisture. The air grew colder the farther they went, carrying a strange, metallic echo. For nearly 30 yards, the path wound into the earth before splitting into two narrow tunnels. One ranger thought he heard the faint sound of dripping water, but to the campers waiting outside, the minutes dragged on like hours. When the rangers emerged again, their faces were grim. They had not found a body, but they had found something else, an old emergency radio lodged against a stone ledge, its casing cracked, but the antenna still intact. It was the kind of device Tom Bradley was known to carry. What unsettled them most was that, despite its battered condition, the radio still showed faint signs of life. The battery, impossibly corroded after 8 years, flickered weakly when they tested it. No one could explain how it had transmitted coordinates so recently. The items were carefully collected and bagged for evidence, but the sense of unease lingered. If Tom had made it this far, what had stopped him from getting out? Why leave his gear scattered outside the cave? And above all, how could a broken radio still send out a signal 8 years after its owner had vanished? The discovery reopened the Bradley case with renewed urgency. For the family, it was a cruel gift. Proof that Tom had reached the caves, but no closure, no answers. For investigators, it was a puzzle that defied logic. And for the campers who had stumbled into this mystery, it was something far more haunting, the realization that Yosemite still held secrets no one was meant to uncover. The discovery near the cave reignited a case many had long considered cold. Rangers reopened their files, family members were contacted, and once again, Tom Bradley's name filled the headlines. Yet the evidence raised more questions than it answered. The emergency radio became the focal point of debate. Experts examined it closely, confirming it was the same model Tom had carried. The damage was extensive, the battery eroded beyond practical function. By every technical measure, it should have been dead years ago. And yet, the campers had heard a signal. Some specialists argued that natural interference, atmospheric conditions, bouncing old frequencies might have created the illusion of a transmission, but the problem was the precision. The beeps had been Morse code, spelling coordinates. Random interference could not explain that. Attention turned to the journal fragments. Forensic teams tried to recover legible writing, but time had blurred most of the ink. The few words that remained trapped, signal, no light, suggested Tom had made it into the cave, alive and desperate. But why had he never emerged? And if he had perished inside, why was there no body, no bones, nothing left behind? Theories multiplied. One suggested Tom had been injured, unable to climb back out, and slowly succumbed in the darkness. Another proposed that sudden flooding in the cave system might have carried his remains deeper into passages no one had yet explored. Still others whispered of foul play, that someone else had been with him, someone who left the equipment behind to confuse the trail. A more unsettling theory circulated quietly among park staff. The radio signal, they said, might not have come from Tom at all. What if someone or something had reactivated it? The wilderness was vast, and caves often drew those who wanted to remain hidden. Was it possible another presence had found the device and used it, deliberately or unknowingly, to send out that cryptic message? None of the theories could be proven. Each answered some questions but left others wide open. The cave remained sealed off after the search, not for danger of collapse, but because the sense of unease it carried had begun to unsettle even the rangers themselves. Yosemite had claimed many lives over the years, but in Tom Bradley's case, it seemed the park had not just taken him, it had kept his story alive in ways no one could explain. As the investigation slowed and officials finally closed the case, one truth remained unshaken. No one truly knew what had happened in those mountains. The forest had given back fragments, shoes, a torn jacket, bones scattered near the cave, but never the full story. It was as though the wilderness itself had swallowed the final moments of their lives, leaving only whispers for the living to puzzle over. For the families, the years of waiting, searching, and clinging to hope had ended in the most painful way. With silence. No goodbye. No clear explanation. Only shadows of what might have been. The parents grew older with unanswered questions. The siblings carried an emptiness that could never be filled, and friends spoke less and less of the trip, as though mentioning it aloud might reopen a wound that time could not heal. Perhaps the most haunting part of this story is how ordinary it began, just a group of friends, chasing freedom, adventure, and laughter on a summer trip. None of them could have known that their footsteps into the forest would be their last. Stories like these remind us how fragile our lives really are. A single decision, a sudden change in weather, or an unseen danger can alter everything forever. And while investigators may try to solve the riddle, while theories may circulate, sometimes the truth lies buried where no one can reach it. To you, the listener, I leave this message. Cherish the people you love, speak the words you have been holding back, and never take tomorrow for granted. Because in the end, the mystery is not only about how they vanished, but also about what remains for those left behind, the aching reminder that life is precious, fleeting, and never guaranteed. If this story left you with chills, imagine the countless other disappearances still hidden in the shadows. Subscribe to Last Seen and join us as we uncover more mysteries the world has almost forgotten.